Good afternoon. My name is Praveen Chakravarti, and I'm going to be moderating this session for the next hour or so. What we thought we would do is we would make it as informal and interactive as possible, and hence we are going to have a conversation here, and towards the end of the conversation, we'd certainly invite all of you to participate in it as well. So let me begin. The great Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter, he called the process of innovation creative destruction. It's creative and it's destructive. So can CSR funds be used for something destructive? That's really the question that we want to explore in today's session. And we're actually both coincidentally and fortunate to have almost every aspect of this represented on the panel. We have someone from the corporate sector, Shankar Venkateshwaran from the Tatas. We have Professor Anil Gupta from IIM Ahmedabad representing academia. We have Shardul Shroff, an eminent lawyer representing the legal fraternity, and will talk to us about interpretation of CSR funding for innovation. We have Ms. Mamta Binani from the Company Secretary Institute, who will actually tell us whether she will be willing to certify CSR funding for innovation as being permissible or not. And while we await, we will have, hopefully soon, Dr. Bhaskar Chatterjee, who's actually a regulator, to join us. So in that sense, we've got all aspects covered. So I want to set some context for this discussion, and then I'm going to just call upon people to give their views and thoughts. So innovation really is the bedrock for any sustainable economic growth, as most economists would allude to. So on that aspect, how does India fare? According to World Bank data, India spends less than 1% of GDP on research and development, R&D expenditure. Of course, the more developed nations such as the US, Germany, and Japan spend a lot more. But guess what? Israel spends 4%. Slovenia spends 3%. Portugal spends 2%. Even the smaller emerging economies spend a lot more on R&D than India does. Can CSR funds be used for funding breakthrough innovation that can actually push up India's R&D expenditure as a percentage of GDP? And what is innovation? How do you define innovation? Is innovation really only products? Is innovation processes? Innovation services? While we discussed this as the country ushered in the GST law yesterday, there may actually also be more innovative ways to fund innovations by partnering with the state government. I heard Mukund Rajan talk about midday meal scheme in the morning as one government innovation that worked. I also heard Shobhana talk about how the Jharkhand Chief Minister says that CSR funds should be employed in the state of Jharkhand primarily. And I'll narrate one incident to show how the GST law can actually be a catalyst for funding innovation by partnering with state governments. In 1982, in the state of Tamil Nadu, M.G. Ramachandran, the then Chief Minister, wanted to usher in the midday meal scheme for students to continue to stay in school. The problem was, he wanted to do it across 52,000 schools to all 72 lakh children. The budget needed at that time was 150 crores. The budget allocated previously for that scheme was 5 crores. Where was he going to get this money, extra money from? He actually increased taxes on goods and funded the midday meal scheme through increased taxation. In a GST setup, he's not going to be able to do that. It's very likely that governments that want to fund such innovative practices may actually now start to look to the private sector to deploy their CSR funds. There's no denying that the midday meal scheme has been one of the most innovative government programs. So there is, I'm not surprised when I heard Shobhana say that the Jharkhand Chief Minister wants to ensure that the CSR funds have to be spent largely in the state of Jharkhand. So there are various ways of funding innovation, both by partnering with governments as well as through the involvement of the private sector. So I'm actually now going to start with the person from the corporate world, Shankar, and ask Shankar, how do they look at innovation? How do you define innovation? And do you find the current law limiting in your ability to fund innovation? And by innovation, we mean breakthrough innovation.
Thanks, Praveen, and good morning, everyone, and thanks CII for this opportunity to be part of this panel. I think the way you've categorized innovation is a good one. It's products, goods and services, products in a generic sense, as well as methods and approaches. And I think the latter is very important when we're talking CSR. While typically when you talk to a company, when you talk about innovation, it tends to sort of be very product oriented. So let me talk a bit about both. I think both are important. And one of the things that I think that companies need to be mindful of is not to create something that I call a CSR bubble, that everything good in CSR lies only in CSR, because it's actually CSR at the end of the day is development done by companies, and we need to look at social development in the largest sense and look at innovations that are happening outside of this bubble and therefore not create bubbles. So whether it's government, midday meals, or whether it's civil society, I think we need to look at that in a larger sense. But coming more specifically to your question, one of the things that the Act does is in Schedule 7, does talk about innovation, and in a sense implies product innovation, and there puts some limitations. It talks about certain kinds of education institutions, incubators located in educational institutions which are approved, and so on and so forth. That does definitely pose a challenge, and I think it poses two kinds of challenges, because at the end of the day, when you're looking at innovation in CSR, it has to be a problem worth solving, and it has to be a problem that's being faced by people at the base of the pyramid. And the question that I would have, and Anil is perhaps best placed to answer it, is are these educational institutions really able to understand and identify those questions, those problems that are worth solving? So if that is not the case, then you are actually going to be funding something that the educational institutions think they would want to solve. So I think that presents one challenge. The other challenge is on some ideas and some work that companies do when they work in CSR, and many of us, like our group, has been working there for a long time, and Tata Steel, for example, and Tata Power for over 100 years, are in touch with communities and know what the problems they are facing, and so in a sense have a sense of what they want to solve. Can they not then invest in technological innovations themselves? Can they not bring value? So we talked about water this morning. I think innovation is as much about an idea of how do we solve a problem in water, as much as how do we bring that solution to the ground in a manner that is cost effective, that's resource effective, doesn't use power or any of those constraints that lie in some of the setups. So companies can do that, because in many ways this is an engineering problem. So how does one solve this problem? The present Act, I don't know whether it is limiting. So I think there are some limitations. I think the process side of it, if we open our eyes and go beyond the CSR bubble, I think there are process innovations that are happening around, and I think companies need to be aware of them and adopt them, and indeed many of them do. But I think it's in product innovations where there might be some limitations.
Thanks, Shankar. If I were to kind of paraphrase what you said, while CSR funds can be used for Swachh Bharat to deploy more, to build more toilets, can CSR funds be used to build a new toilet to come up with a new technologically more savvier toilet. And I guess what I hear you say is the law is unclear about that. But the law is very clear that CSR funds can be used to fund innovation in academic universities that are centrally recognized. Now, Professor Gupta of IIM Ahmedabad, the government seems to think innovation can only happen in academic institutions. Do you subscribe to that view?
I would shock some of you maybe, but I must do that. You see, unless you take risk yourself, you cannot encourage somebody else to take risk. And I'm very candid, exceptions apart. I may have taken a lot of risk in my life, but by and large, academics are not known for taking a lot of risk. Why couldn't we create incubators also in industry? So for example, if you have an automobile company or if you're a steel company, and if somebody has come out with a new kind of specialty steel, today we import for all medical devices, the special steel that is required is imported from Germany and other countries. We hardly manufacture, we manufacture a huge quantity, 20 million tons in one plant of JSW, Tata Steel, and 710 million tons. You know, large amount of steel which is used for our infrastructure, but when it comes to specialty steel, we are not. Now, who will design that? Innovators. Where would they best be placed? Near the furnaces, near the tool rooms, near the shop floor. So I don't see any reason why every company in its own vertical not create an incubator where startups can be invited and given facilities to turn their ideas into reality. So I think that is one revolution we should unleash as early as possible. I mean, at this moment, even the current guidelines won't come in the way, but maybe they can be made more explicit. They say that the CSR committee of the board can decide within the Schedule 8, whatever is written can be done. So I think, therefore, there's a broad sanction available within which we can work. Second point that we must make very clear, we were talking about innovation definition. As an academic, I can give you a very simple tool. Look at the three metrics. Method on one side, material on other side, and third side, application. Old, new, old, new, old, new. Divide it into two parts. At least one of the three dimensions should be new, and it's innovation. So either new method, new process, new material, new product, or a new application. So when aspirin was used as a blood thinner, it was old material, old method to manufacture it, but new application. That was innovation at that time. So we could think of innovation as something that each one of us sitting here can do, because you can find a new application for something that exists already. That is the quickest path of innovation. Find a new domain where it can be applied. Find a new process that can be. We are wonderful in process. You know, thanks to the 1970 Patent Act, we can re-engineer, reverse engineer any damn product anywhere from the world. You know, particularly in chemistry, in drugs, we are very good. Now, that gives a strength. It is not by chance that India has the largest number of US FDA approved manufacturing plants in drug in the country. That's all because of that, the capacity that we developed at that time. So we have a huge capacity. Now, let me come to how can CSR funds be used? Can tail wag the dog? Can small funds make significant difference? So I would begin with first challenge, which is look at the most poor people of our country, who are in tribal areas. Where are tribes living? Most of them in forest. The entire forest produce all leaves, fruits, seeds, nuts, everything that comes on grasses, which comes from the forest material, forest resources, which poor people collect, the tribal people collect, comes out into for the value addition as raw material. Low value, low wages. There cannot be a better way of perpetuating poverty. There cannot be a better way. We have kept these people poor for the last 67 years, 70 years. We need to change this. High value, high wages, which means in situ value addition. Wherever in country we have resources which are underutilized, we must add value to them there. Why waste so much resources in transporting them to another place to value add? Today, the manufacturing facilities have become flexible, can become more flexible. We have 3D tools, we have 3D printing tools, we have other tools. They know how to make liquor, so they know distillation. Give them fractional distillation tool, they can get many more phytochemicals from the same plant, same mahua flower, and their income will increase. The moment you buy what is sold in quintals today in grams, you have added value. That's what innovation should achieve. It should make it possible for poor people to make high value products high-value services, and then the poverty is gone from our country, and it is possible in our lifetime to see a different India. Now, which are the levels at which we have been working, which may be of interest to you? The Honeybee Network started 26 years ago. There's a book outside on grassroots innovations, available to those of you who would like to see these experiences. And we start from children. So there's an award we give. Earlier, Dr. Kalam used to give this award. From last year, our president gives award, named after Dr. Kalam, APJ Abdul Kalam Ignite Award. A girl, class 8 from Patna, saw a walker being used by her grandfather and realized that this walker cannot work on staircase because it has no adjustable leg. She just sent us 2-line statement. Can the legs of the walker become adjustable? Our team of National Innovation Foundation in the Fab Lab made that product, licensed to a company. She got few lakh rupees as a license fee. She gets royalty on every piece that is sold by the company which has been licensed this. She is one of the youngest entrepreneurs, only by her imagination, only by sending 2-line statement. Now imagine if all of us sitting here could sponsor the conversion of these ideas of children to products and services. We are not just helping promote innovation, we are building a generation, a young people generation, which after 20 years, 30 years would not need a workshop like this. Because they would have already internalized the logic of innovation in their everyday life. Manak is a new scheme which Department of Science and Technology has started in collaboration with NIF. 4.5 lakh schools, 2 ideas from every school, 10 lakh ideas will be taken up and filtered to about 2,000 and then 2,000 to 60, which will be showcased at Rashtrapati Bhavan. Every year we organize Festival of Innovation at Rashtrapati Bhavan. I'm inviting you all next year, 4th to 10th March. You are all invited to the Festival of Innovation at Rashtrapati Bhavan, which Rashtrapati Bhavan organized. India is the only country where head of the state provides 2-week residency to innovation scholars. They stay as the guest of the President of India, including children, students, farmers. So at this festival, we should be able to showcase the best example of partnership between corporations and communities. So CSR provides a framework for connecting corporations with creative communities, something which has not happened very much. I must tell you honestly, we have filed 800 patents in NIF. How many of them have been converted? About 80, 10%. But how many with large companies? None at all. None at all. Not one. Small companies, medium companies, yes. Why is hunger so little in the large corporations? I don't understand. Once I went to Ludhiana, cycle capital of our country, and I talked about innovations in cycle. Cycles have not undergone any design change. You can't use cycle as a juicer, as a platform which you can attach a mixie. You can grind, you can juice, extract juice, you can do a whole range of things by cycle. Cycle can become a multi-purpose machine for a poor person as a motive force. So I asked the famous hero cycle chief, I said, look, there's so many innovations which I shared, you like them, what are you going to do? He said, Professor Gupta, you know what? We are doing very fine. Now, if you're doing fine, that means there's no scope for innovation. I don't wish any industry to go through bad time, please. I wish that you make more progress, but making more progress by including others to add value to your products and lines and your businesses will be even more joyful. So let me conclude by saying that there are many ways in which this window can be opened for the corporation communities. We can think of children. We also give award to college students, Gyati Award, Gandhian Young Technological Innovation Award, a cancer, early stage detection of cancer by a doctoral student in Jawaharlal Center for Advanced Studies in Bangalore. When the cancerous cell have more sodium ions, the healthy cells have more potassium ions. When the light passes through the cancerous cell, it refracts more. The normal cell, light reflects less. The first time in the world, this boy has developed a non-invasive way of identifying early stage cancer before the lumps have formed, breast cancer. Who will invest in this idea? The idea is lying on our website. We haven't received a single query from any firm, sir, we like this idea even though our business is different, but we want to promote this idea. Why can't people, hungry CEOs of the companies, be looking at these innovations which are lying on our site, sachi.org? No, we are not looking for them. So how can we help engineering students? How can we help professionals? In the last budget, thanks to the railway minister, I don't know whether he was here today, 400 workshops of railways have been opened for fabrication to grassroots innovators and startups. First time in our budget, that has been already announced. Let us take help of your retired fabricators, shop floor people, your mechanics, your engineers, who can help grassroots innovators join with these distributed in situ incubation model, wherever innovations exist, support them. right there. We could do that. We can also try to issue challenge awards. There are a lot of unmet social needs. Can we issue challenges, district-wide challenges, regional challenges, national challenges, and add value to them? So CSR can be a great driver for transforming our country by picking up problems which are falling through the cracks. Don't do what other people are doing well. If you want to expand in sanitation, as you rightly said, do we have 15 liters of water for draining a sanitation for toilets every time? We don't have drinking water. So what happens? These toilets will get choked and will become a testimony to our indifference to design diversity in the country. It's a great tragedy which is happening. I'm telling you honestly, I'm telling you at this platform, large number of toilets that we are building require, because of the physics of the design and the surface design, a lot of water for draining. We don't have that water. So we should have used toilet which require only 2 liter water, 1 liter water, maybe no water at all, deep pit water. Yet we are not building those toilets. So there's a great deal of innovation, design innovation which is required where companies can play a role. That's what we are good at. So let me conclude by saying that there is a huge scope for tail to wag the dog. These small monies can achieve bigger results than big monies that government is spending, because government is able to do one thing million times. They can scale up, but they can't differentiate. That's where our advantage comes. That is where this platform can play the most important role. And I hope that this meeting will turn to be a trendsetter, a game changer, when lots of innovation will get supported by the CSR groups of the companies. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor. I guess the real question then boils down to is the notion of for-profit innovation and not-for-profit innovation. Reminds me of Bill Gates' famous quote that 90% of all medical R&D goes to solve diseases that affect 10% of the world's population, or the rich man's diseases. So it's really about who's going to then provide funding that can solve diseases that affect the bottom 90%. And that's probably a big challenge for a policymaker. And that's where I'd like to get Dr. Chatterjee to come in. And I'm wondering, when you think about innovation and allowing CSR funding for innovation, you're grappling with the issue of what's profitable and what's not profitable, what's impactful and what's not impactful. So how could you tweak this to make sure that we can actually provide CSR funding for new designs of toilets, for example?
This is an extremely pertinent question, and something that now we need to reflect on. We've had 2 years of the CSR legislation. A lot of corporates are thinking many of their projects through. There's a very timely question to ask. When you bring in legislation, I don't know whether all of us see everything when we actually write that legislation. It's very hard to predict how things will go, and the legislation, in a way, had its limitations. It still does. And the fact is that we, at the time of envisaging the legislation, felt that if we allow boards of companies the elbow room, the decision-making powers, allow CSR to be addressed by the finest minds in the corporate world. If that we could do, then innovation would be one of the things that corporate minds would be exercised about and bring in. Schedule 7, therefore, actually covers a gamut of areas in which all of these projects can be undertaken. We did not think, I admit that whether technologies could be funded under CSR. That was not part of our thought process. What we felt was that, let's say, take the example of toilets, and it's so true that we just don't have the water. Therefore, if we're going to build 1 million toilets, then we need to bring in also technologies that will actually work over time. If you build 1 million toilets and more than 75% of them don't work, then it's a waste of resources. So we said, if you projectivize and say, all right, we have a technology. Let's build a project, let's build just 50 toilets with this technology, and let's see if it works. The legislation allows you to take up what you might call pilot projects, just to test the technology that you have. At present, the law does not permit you to fund the technology itself, and maybe that is a limitation. Our intention actually was that we would use CSR funds to, as Anil just now mentioned, address the problem. If there is a problem, how do we solve it? And can we look at that problem in diverse ways, get good minds to address the problem and try and solve it out? And can we projectivize it so at the end of the project, we could evaluate and say, yes, did we succeed or did we not? And even if you didn't, it doesn't matter, because then part 2 would unfold in such a way that the lessons you learned could then be taken forward. So in a way, this CSR piece that we have, the 15,000 odd companies that are there, the resources that they have, at the end of the day, we would want that it is best utilized for solving also the problems of the poor. And I'm very happy that we talked about tribals, about forest produce, about what we could do there, rather than, several thousand miles away in some city. So can we also use the CSR money with the finest brains in the corporate world and try and address problems which exist at the grassroots level? I also want to emphasize the fact that innovation doesn't necessarily come from corporate minds. Innovation comes a lot from civil society and the suggestions they give. Because at the end of the day, it is civil society which is in touch at the grassroots. And the CSR legislation reaches out not to just the corporate world. It reaches out to civil society. Civil society identifies problems for you. It even suggests what the grassroots people are saying about innovation. And we need to hear that. We need to hear it and not pay it lip service, because they tell you the problems that need to be solved. They often bring solutions which are out of the box. It's the corporate ear that needs to listen to that and say, hey, that we could perhaps do. So tell us, what can we do about it? And in the synergy between the corporate and civil society, the ways of solving innovative ways of solving problems on the ground can actually come to the table. It is our hope that this legislation will prove to be a catalyst in this regard. Legislation is not frozen for all time. If there are limitations which we feel stand in the way of innovation, we could suggest that we could tweak it. But right now, what we have is a good launching platform. And if we are able to use it to our advantage, particularly in the area of innovation, it will take us a great way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Chatterjee opened a small window for us by saying that we could actually suggest and potentially tweak the law to fund innovation. So we might actually capitalize on that. But I think one inadvertent impact of the CSR law has been this focus on outcomes, on what does a funding get in terms of impact. How many kids have been sent to school, or how many toilets have been built, and this focus on outcomes. And that perhaps is an inherent limitation in the law to help CSR funds for innovation that could actually fail. When you provide funding for innovation that may or may not work. But the law doesn't actually recognize this, and hence we seem to have this this focus on outcomes. So from your interpretation of the law, Shardul, do you think it's the corporates that are just sticking to the letter of the law? Or as Dr. Chatterjee says, we've left it open to the committee, and they could interpret it in a much wider manner. Where do you stand on it?
I think it's a matter of interpretation. Everything which Professor Gupta has asked is capable of falling within the law. And let me explain how. The concept of a CSR activity is not defined in the section itself. It's put in a roundabout way. It says, and I'm reading section 135, subsection 3, the Corporate Social Responsibility Committee shall formulate and recommend to the board a corporate social responsibility policy which shall indicate the activities to be undertaken by the company as specified in Schedule Roman 7. Now, whether this is therefore limiting because it uses the word specified was one of the issues that was debated at length. Then they came out with the company's corporate social responsibility policy rules in 2014, where section 2 clause C defined corporate social responsibility, and it uses very specific words. It says means and includes but is not limited to projects or programs relating to activities specified in Schedule Roman 7 to the Act, or projects or programs relating to activities undertaken by the board of directors of a company in pursuance of recommendations of CSR committee of the board as per declared CSR policy of the company, subject to the condition that policy will cover subjects enumerated in Schedule Roman 8. Now, 2 is wider than 1 because in 1 it basically specifies activities in Schedule Roman 7, but in subclause 2 it says projects and programs relating to activities undertaken by the board of directors pursuant to a recommendation on such conditions that the policy covers subjects. So the approach from 1 is activities, the approach from 2 is subjects. Now if you look at the 10 activities of the 7th schedule, and they're interesting because they fall in 2 buckets. The first bucket is basically eradicating hunger, poverty, malnutrition, promoting preventive healthcare, sanitation, and making available safe water. Promoting education, including special education, employment enhancing vocational skills, especially among children, women, elderly, and differently abled, and livelihood enhancement projects. Promoting gender equality, empowering women, setting up homes and hostels for women and orphans, setting up old age homes, daycare centers, and such other facilities for senior citizens, and measures for reducing inequality faced by social and economically backward classes. Ensuring environmental sustainability, ecological balance, protection of flora and fauna, animal welfare, agroforestry, conservation of natural resources, and maintaining quality of soil, air, and water. This is the first 4 batches, or first 4 entries, and I'd like to read the last 2 entries. Contribution of funds provided to technology incubators located within academic institutions which are approved by the central government and rural development projects. The remainder basically relate to protection of national heritage, art and culture, measures for the benefit of armed forces, training of rural sports, and contribution to the Prime Minister's Relief Fund. Now, if you again go back to the rule, any activity which promotes, say for example, poverty eradication, or for that matter, livelihood enhancement projects, and which employs innovation in relation to execution of the project is a CSR activity. There is nothing which limits the use of innovation to achieve the subjects which are set out in the 6 entries that I read out. And the method is not prescribed. The process is not prescribed. How do you get there is not prescribed, and therefore using innovation to get there is certainly an activity governed by the CSR policy, governed by section 135, governed by the policy rule, and there is nothing limiting this. It's only in the mind of the boards of directors that they want to take something which is obvious, which is evident. Let me also deal with this outcome issue. There is nothing in the CSR regulations which spells out that an outcome must be in terms of measurable products. Let me read it out why I say so. The CSR activities falls under Rule 4 and Rule 5, basically. And 6 says CSR policy. The CSR policy of a company shall inter alia include the following, namely, a list of CSR projects or programs which a company plans to undertake falling within the purview of Schedule 7, specifying modalities of execution of such project or programs and implementation schedules for the same, and monitoring process of such projects or programs. Nothing in this says that if an innovative process has been employed, which is experimental and results in failure, is non-use of CSR funds. There is nothing limiting the situation that I must have an output of 50 toilets set up or 5 schools set up. This section or the rule does not limit failure or does not avoid failure or does not recognize failure. It only recognizes expense which is part of a corporate social responsibility, which is outside of the corporate object of a company, by virtue of the law has been made a subject of activity and requires spending 2% of the net profit as calculated. So all these limiting factors which are currently being debated are not within the law. They can be easily employable, and all that it needs is the Ministry of Corporate Affairs to take out a frequently asked question, which was basically an approach and a tool which Mr. Chatterjee had employed in the past, asking, where he responded to questions asked. And if in response to a question asked, this statement is put into a MCA clarification, it will be clearly something which will be understood by companies.
Thank you. So then it's appropriate I turn to Mamta. In your experience of working with companies and as the President of the Company Secretary Association, do you find that the companies still sit back and say, let me just contribute to the Prime Minister's Relief Fund and be safe? How do you goad them, and what's your experience been? Could you share that?
Thank you, Praveen, and thank you to CII for giving the Institute of Company Secretaries this opportunity. Let me first and foremost put that, as Shardulji was saying, that Schedule 7 is not limiting at all. Let me put the law into a little perspective. India is the first country and the only country to have mandated CSR by law. I think this deserves a big hand to the country at first. If you look at the Indian ethos and if you look at all the organizations and even the individuals who have been operating or who have been in India or who has been an Indian, CSR has always been the mantra. And even in the yesteryears, there was a mantra called PSR, that is Personal Social Responsibility. Very honestly, you know, I was sitting in a board meeting about 2 days back, and I don't have hesitation to share the name. It was Century Ply Boards, where the chairman was mentioning that, Mamta, this 2% is fine, but since this 2% has come, we have started spending less. The corporates have started, yes, that's true. The corporates have started spending less because there was a time when corporates used to feel that it is our mandate, said and unsaid, unwritten, that we need to spend at least 10% of our earnings in corporate social responsibility. But now that the law says 2%, so we somehow get limited to this. Now, there has always been a lot of hullabaloo about CSR, but we all also have to agree that this is just a recent phenomenon. We have just taken off. And the low-hanging fruits that the companies see is much easier to take it. So, for example, people see that health, sanitation, etc. are the low-hanging fruits because we find a lot of civil society engagement in that. So therefore, when one of the panelists was mentioning that we need to engage more of civil society, that provision is there in the law. And that is why the section says that if you want to do CSR, it's not mandatory or necessary to do it alone. You could tie up with the NGOs. You could have your own trust, your own society to also do that. But what is the caveat that they mention? And I think that's pretty good also. They say that if you are tying up with an NGO or a trust or a society which is not yours, you need to make sure that that NGO at least have 3 years of experience in whatever policy that you are making for your company. Now look at the framework of things. The law mandates CSR mentioned in Schedule 7. Now, when the first draft Schedule 7 came out, let me just give you a few examples, because it will set the tone. It said eradication of extreme hunger. It also mentioned Chief Minister's Relief Fund as one of the object in Schedule 7. But when we saw the final rules getting a shape and getting notified, we saw that the word extreme was no more there. So it said alleviation of hunger or removal of poverty, but the word extreme was not there. Now, a lot of thought goes behind this schedule, the framework, and that's the reason why I'm mentioning these finer points. Chief Minister's Relief Fund was not there. We know how many, news started appearing in the newspapers that how could these funds would also be misutilized, and therefore we saw some minute changes and some broad-based changes, which is very welcome. Now look at the schedule. It talks about flora, it talks about fauna, it talks about poverty, it talks about land use, water, everything that can be thought under the sun finds a place in it. Now, incubators, innovation finds a very recent entry, and I think what even Mr. Bhaskar was mentioning, that law is not static. Law is nothing but extended logic, and law is nothing that we see over a period of time getting a shape. So therefore, when the government realized that more money or more resources can be pooled in, and incubators should be given a thrust, it did so. And very recently, I take pleasure in mentioning that on the 29th of June 2016, the definition of startup company was also changed. Though the startup company, and why I'm talking about startup, because I'm getting into a marriage of incubators and people who take this initiative forward. And why are we talking about CSR? Why CSR? Why corporates? Because corporates have the wherewithal, corporates have the money, corporates have the bandwidth to explore and take it to further dimensions. And as I was mentioning about startup company, now where we could take it to the government. Startup company has been specifically defined by the notification number 180 capital E wide the DIPP, that is the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Now if you see the definition of startup, I think we can make a representation that that's very limiting. So to get into that definition and to get registered as a startup, believe me, you need professional help. You need to pay money to the people who give you that professional help, and you just don't understand that even after spending maybe 1 year of professional help and a lot of paperwork, you still get qualified as a startup or not. So I think that government really has to loosen these strings. And when we talk about the government's perspective, we also have to realize that we are a country of, we are not a size of a Japan or a Malaysia or an Australia. We are India. We are 125 crore people. So government also has to sometimes pull up the socks and say, hey, this should not be misused. And therefore they fix up a lot of parameters. So dichotomy is there, but we need to strike a balance. So having said that, as I was mentioning, that what is the role of the government and what is the role of professionals like us? The role of the government is to create an ecosystem, right? Is to create the right thrust in the economy which pulls and pushes them up. And what is the role of people like us? To execute it and to take it forward. Government, I think we are very happy to be in an era where our Prime Minister Narendra Modi Sahab is doing so well, and the government is so proactive. It listens to everything. It wants to work on everything that's troubling the economy and the country, especially the poorer sector of the economy. And we see that the startup, it said that, okay, if you are finding problem in giving sweat equity, which it was, I'm sure you know, that prior to 19th of July 2016, very recently, it said, the government said, the previous notification said that you cannot issue sweat equity more than 15%. Now that was a limiting factor. The government realized that if I limit this, why people will come forward and put all their energies into it. So it said, okay, fine, we allow you to put up to 50%. So 15% per annum it was there, and it was limiting to 25% of the paid up capital in the entire lifetime of the company. But this 19th day of July notification said you can invest, you can give sweat equity up to 50% of the paid up capital, but within 5 years of its incorporation or registration of the company. Now huge fill up. a huge creation of an ecosystem, and the market has taken it up very positively. In the same manner, employee stock option scheme, I'm sure you're aware, gentlemen, that employee stock option scheme is a scheme where you are generating interest among the employees, and you're generating interest in the sense that, okay, this is my company, and the sense of ownership enables the employees to work further. Now, in that also, government brought about a change, and it said, previously it said that any promoter or a group of promoters who are employees in the company cannot be given employee stock option scheme. And it also went on to say that if any director, cumulatively or alone, or with its friends, are holding 10% of the paid up capital of the company, directly or indirectly, cannot be given stock employee scheme under the stock option scheme. But after the recent notification, it said all this is being allowed. Now, therefore, the limited point that I'm trying to make is government is creating the ecosystem. Now it is up to us, how do we take it forward? There were few discussions which was being taken that about the boardroom, is it, the law has enabled, the law has said that CSR committee has to be made. It has given the composition of the CSR committee also. In the morning, in the inaugural session, I think Madam mentioned from, who's your president designate, mentioned that it's lying with the females. Not really. I'm also in the board of 6 to 7 big companies, and I've seen that it is actually a combination of, the male and the female gender. But having said that, that's not, I think, too material. But what I want to say is, I think we are just gearing up. So therefore, the corporates are fearful that, okay, if I take something new, I may lose that precious money, and that money may not go to the right section of the people. So what they think is, okay, whatever is available at the moment, let me pick it up. And gradually, in the boardrooms, discussions are being held about innovation. What we need to thrive on, I think, is a separate section in the company which talks about CSR, which only thinks, eats and drinks CSR. The problem with the board is we've got so much agenda to go through, we've got so much to carry on, that probably at times we see, okay, CSR is being looked after, the company secretary or the compliance officer, and whatever project is brought in by them, the board of directors, just kind of certify and say, okay, this is fine, just go ahead and do it. Make sure that the money is just used for the proper purpose. I think when we have a dedicated cell in the company, which, as I mentioned, which only talks and thinks about CSR, you will see more and more innovation coming into it. If I am given time, I'll talk about it more, but then as you wish.
Sure, I'll come back. I want to weave, string a lot of these discussions together. So Shankar, I want to, now clearly the regulator and the policy maker, the lawyer and the auditor all seem to think corporates can fund innovation. The law doesn't limit them at all. So what's the problem? Now, I don't mean to pick on you, but you're the only corporate representative on the panel. So what is limiting corporate CSR funding of innovation?
So, no, happy to be picked on, no problem. I got friends in the audience. I think again, if you just break it up into approaches and products, I don't think in approaches there is ever an issue. And so, in a sense, I would interpret what Shardul said as saying application of innovation on the ground. I don't think that is a challenge at all. In fact, I would argue that that's, if you take many of our companies, you will find examples of doing that. So it is application, it's about using what we know best, which is adaptation, scaling, and so on, and doing that. Clearly no limitation. And I think many of our CSR committees are very active, ask all the right questions, and push all our CSR teams to do that. And in many of our companies, we have fairly large CSR teams. I think the gray area still is in the technology bit. So let me be more specific. It's gray, but it's not something that is necessarily going to stop us. Let me pick up on a point that Anil made. Let's look at a toilet, okay? And obviously a toilet has to be one that is water efficient, because you are going to run into that problem. Are the current ones there? Probably not quite there. So you need water efficiency, you need energy efficiency, and you need an ability to install it very quickly and to be very easily maintained. So there is a case, and people like the Gates Foundation have been investing in innovations in toilets. Now, you have these innovations sitting in a lab. You need to get them to the ground. How do we do that? We are quite happy to set up an innovation center that does that because we understand engineering, and this is an engineering problem. Whether it gets, it's part of CSR or not, if we think we need to do it as a group, we would do it. But that is a question, is something like, because if you interpret that into that section, into that point number, I don't know, 8 or 9, and which is those institutions, I think that's where it starts getting gray, and that's when a lot of questions keep getting asked. So that's just an example of it. But I'm absolutely one with everybody on the table that 1% of a problem it does not mean that the rest of the 99% of the Act is a problem. I think there's some great stuff in the Act. I think making this a boardroom discussion is a critical element of the Act. I think ensuring transparency and reporting is a very critical element of the Act. I think it enables NGO partners to analyze and understand which companies they should be going to for. I think there are fantastic enablers in the Act. But since you asked me the question, this is the grayness on it. As I said, it doesn't stop anyone who wants to do it, but it does raise a set of questions, and we need to respond to that.
Sure, and please do feel free to jump in if you feel like you want to add something to all the panelists. But then I do want to bring that back to you, Dr. Chatterjee. I think it's great that you've actually set the tone and said, listen, go ahead and interpret it in as wide a canvas as you want. But still this notion that technology is excluded, or CSR funding for technology, or CSR funding for new products. Is there a possibility to tweak the law at this stage, you think, to add some of these exclusionary items so that innovation can be funded?
See, the possibility of tweaking the Act always exists. Let's not eliminate it. As I said, the law is a living instrument by which we address issues that come up. But let me say what Shardul said is that the law currently is adequate. Just to take Shankar's example, if all the law says is you need to projectivize. So if you said that we are bringing in this technology or developing it, and we will have a pilot project for it, and part of the project was the development of the technology, and then its trial on the field, and then whatever impact it left. Also, Shardul rightly clarified that it doesn't talk about success. I am one of the believers who believe that you learn more from failure than you do from success. It could be that your technology, which you designed in the lab, when you put it in the pilot project, actually failed. And you say, oh, let's go back to the lab again, because we could have then now designed something that we didn't foresee. And if this was projectivized, taken as a pilot project, even now, it would be very much within what you might call the letter of the law. So I wanted to address this gray area. 2 quick comments on what Mamta said, very relevant points. On the century ply issue, I don't want to identify them as such. The fact is, the law says that at least 2%. Now, whether you spend 10 or 20 is your choice. What happens now is that what was being touted, if I may use it within inverted commas, as CSR prior to the law, now doesn't pass muster. So what you do for your own employees, what you donate to, the temples or the charitable trust, those things now don't come in. Therefore, in a sense, what they were doing before could have been more in terms of the money spent, but may not now qualify under the legislation. That's all there is to say on that. But yes, just to sort of summarize or sort of conclude this, innovation is literally the heart of the law. And somebody said here, rightly so, that in government, we can do repetitively a lot of things again and again and spend large sums on them. But government is a slow-moving elephant. We are not known for innovation. It's hard for us. We accept innovation. We try and legislate to make sure the innovation happens. But within government itself, across the whole world, it's not just India, innovation is a difficult process and it takes time. The corporates, on the other hand, are lithe, flexible, quick, energetic. And the purpose of the CSR legislation is to allow the boards of companies to use their ability, their strengths, their minds, their capacities. They are the engine drivers of our economy. If CSR is given to them to allow them a free and fair field, they can do wonders in this field. I know that 20,000 crores, which is likely the expenditure that will happen, is still a blip on a screen. But over the years, if we spend it every year, we spend it well, we spend it judiciously, we spend it for the poor people of our country, it will really ensure that our development process gets a major boost. And that was the real object of the legislation.
If there are no other comments from the panel, I want to open it up. We have less than 10 minutes. I want to open it up for questions. So, yeah, I see a hand here. What we'll do is we'll take 3 questions at a time and then try and get them answered. The lady there, I don't know if there are mics being handed out or...
I'm Gauri Sareen and I'm founder of an organization called Sahas Foundation for Women Empowerment. Prior to this, for 18 years, I've been in the corporate sector. Been working for the corporate sector. So I've kind of can see now things, begin to see things from both sides. So the thought, after seeing CSR come on forward, one of the things which struck me very strongly is that organizations, when they start looking at CSR as something to be done as a bureaucratic, and I think that point was very well made, as a bureaucratic tool to fund because they have been kind of compelled to or forced to do. The approach is very much like government. So private sector at the top is not very much different from government, so to speak, is a general point I wanted to make. And therefore, the thought which came to me is that, is there a possibility of CSR going beyond the top and coming bottom up? So we talked about civil society coming in and giving inputs into the whole CSR space. If we could actually engage employees in the whole process of CSR and organizations, that's when we really start talking innovation. The moment employees go out there and say, here is a set of funds you have, you can play with it in the, outside in the field. They come back to the organization and say, now there is a chance to innovate. We have the resources, we have the talent, we have the capability, and can we do something together to make these funds really, really useful and resourceful? And I see the change really happening there. So some comments on that would really help. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Pradeep. I must felicitate CII for having this summit. 2 things. Corporates and government is only centering on metros.
Sorry?
Corporates and the government on CSR work is relocating their space only in metros. Nobody has thought of going to a place which gave India the most, dashing president of India, Rameshwaram. I was 2 days in Rameshwaram there.
If you could come to a question quickly.
The question is that the school where Dr. APJ studied is still without floor. Now, I request the corporates here and the government standing over here to come to that place, come with me, I will help them out to do something for that part of the area. That is one. Second, half a minute. There is no one from the differently abled persons category here or a person without vision here. I'm so sorry to share. Somebody should have been here so that, he or she would have been able to, send his message. Thanks a lot for listening to me.
Okay. The question on employees, very quickly, Mamta, if you want to answer that, and then why are corporates not going beyond metros? Shankar, if you could answer that next.
Yeah. Employees, it's very much allowed. In fact, the law also says that if you're spending X percentage on training the employees also on the CSR front, that can be absorbed as in the CSR expenditure. So which means it will form, yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's there in the law that, yes, it is. In fact, if you're engaging your employees for CSR.
For CSR.
Absolutely, for CSR. Of course, for CSR. And that is the limit.
Mamta, in fact, Rule 4, subclause 5 reads like this. The CSR projects or activities that benefit only the employees of the company and their family shall not be considered as CSR activities.
No, sir, we are not talking about the benefit, Mr. Shroff. We are saying that if the employees of the company, participation, absolutely. We're talking about the participation, that was our question. So if the employees are participating to a certain extent, I think 5% of the, I'm not able to recollect the percentage, but up to 5% of it can be absorbed in the CSR expenditure, the CSR fund that the company has earmarked.
Okay.
So that's a big boost up.
So nothing prevents companies from including employees. Shankar, on corporates going beyond that.
So I'll also just say something on the first. Again, I think several companies in the room enable and provide opportunities for employees to volunteer. And just to give you a number, in our group last year we actually crossed 1 million hours of volunteering. It wasn't counted into this 5% that you're allowed. It is something that we naturally do, and we are hoping that will grow. And we're not alone. I can name several other companies who do that. On the rural versus urban, I think there's clearly a misunderstanding, because I would argue that the bulk of CSR funding is actually rural. All manufacturing companies traditionally recognizing the fact that they disrupt wherever they set up, and the fact that they need license to operate automatically do that. Tata Steel has been working in and around Jamshedpur for, I don't know, 100 years, Tata Power. So I don't think that's entirely true. I think what is also important to understand is that companies the communities around where
Shankar,
they work.
we'll move on. I just want to, 1 second. I think the question on rural versus urban, I think, is very clear, and Dr. Chatterjee says even data corroborates the fact that most CSR spend is in rural areas. I just want to make sure that more people get a chance to ask a question. Yeah, if you don't want to wait for the mic, yeah, go up, stand up and...
Thank you. On research as well as a practitioner, I would like to pose a very macro level question to the panel here, since we have Mr. Chatterjee from the government entity perspective and others. The thing is that CSR has very beautifully brought into practice the 3 arms of society, government, civil society and markets together to work in synergy, something that was not happening that effectively since all the 3 actors were operating in silos. Now all the 3 actors are obviously very consciously worried about the effective application out of all the big words that we have out here, innovation and approach, which have over the past 4 years been more or less settled. That we need innovation, what kind of an approach will be adopted.
Question, please. Question.
Yeah. So in this effective application, something that comes up in the panel discussion also is the communication gap. You know, the 3 actors speak different voices. The academicians speak different voices, civil society speaks different, and the corporate speak a different voices. And we do not see a mechanism where we can synergize these 3 voices, the 3 concerns, level of concerns. And most of the times these concerns come out in conferences like this, which are one-off events. Is there a mechanism that institutes like CII or IICA is thinking where these 3 actors engage with each other, clear their communication gaps, clear the fog on CSR legislation more, more regularly?
Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
I'll take one more. Yeah.
Cannot be considered in isolation. If you were to correctly address this question called, is India ready for funding innovation through CSR? What I want to say is, one, we are considering CSR legislation in its isolation, and we're making a big mistake. Professor Anil Gupta is here. Shankar is here. They'll be able to relate to this because some of their work is relating to this. CRISIL ratings for small NBFCs, which are based on local microfinance institutions. Those microfinance institutions never get good ratings, primarily because the three basic criteria are geographic spread, weak credit profile, modest funding profile. And yet, CSR companies would want to see some amount of innovation in microcredit, some amount of innovation in these spaces that cater to bottom of the pyramid.
Okay.
Second example, this is the most recent one.
Sorry, we're running out of time. The question,
yeah,
just the question.
SEBI's net worth, the SEBI's whole thing of farmer producer organizations being, sort of stopped from getting into forward markets on the clause of net worth. How do people who are legislators, who are regulators, who are designers of policy look at CSR in such a isolation and not consider other aspects of public policy, other aspects of fiscal policy as a deterrent to CSR implementation?
Okay. Before I ask someone to answer, I didn't mean to evade the question on not having enough disabled participation. That is a question more left to the organizers, and perhaps Shefali can answer that later. But on the question of the three legs not working together, I guess the suggestion is to have, drawing from the GST inspiration, have a council, GST council. But maybe Dr. Chatterjee, you could answer that.
No, in fact, the purpose of the legislation, it gives a fillip, I think, you're right, your observation is absolutely correct. That conversation in the area of CSR was never happening. I don't think before the legislation there was a conversation between these three elements of society on CSR. Now the legislation itself is a spur which enables conversation amongst all the three entities. And this platform today that we take up and many of the things that IICA does, and we intend to promote this in a very big way, so that there are conclaves such as this, there are occasions when you can meet and chat and talk and share your views and ideas. These need to be promoted more and more. I couldn't agree with you more on that. And I think with this kind of leadership that we're showing, this will be fostered in the future. Thank you.
Professor Gupta, the second question.
Yeah, I would say that innovations in microfinance space, we started way back in 97 when GYAN was set up, Gujarat Grassroots Innovation Augmentation Network. And 2003, in the budget, we set up with the SIDBI Micro Venture Innovation Fund. Now, microfinance is for things for which market exists. Micro venture finance is for things for which market is yet to be created. That's what innovations are about. So when we talk about financing small-scale innovations, I'm not aware of any other fund in the country which has come up to finance activities for which market does not yet exist, which are novel, which are innovative. So we need innovations in this space, but where are those innovations? I would like to see. Yeah, our experience shows that out of 190 projects that were financed, 80% money came back. Under single signature, money was given, no collateral, no obligation, no legal document, no stamp paper. All over the country. It is all on the list of nifindia.org. So this is an experiment which has succeeded, which needs to be scaled up, which needs to be replicated in different verticals. In sanitation, in water, in health, in education. We need to create financing models which will encourage innovations. And I think CSR funds can be a very useful instrument of triggering innovations, to give a challenge that how do we provide education to children who are not able to come in time because they have to attend to the family, younger siblings. So how do we prevent them from being dropped out because the teachers don't accept that, or don't allow them to come to the class? There's so many small issues of different regions, different places which need to be tackled. So please understand, in tribal areas, the literacy levels are less than 15%, 20%. Still, after all these years, where are we providing support for that? So I think the content, we were talking to Shankaran that if we can provide do-it-yourself content in multiple languages, that would be a great help. I was talking to Mamta that, how do we help the young startup from small towns, villages to set up their companies, So there's lots of new things that can happen for which we need support. The physically challenged person, the walker I mentioned was a physically challenged. There are many other, we have a smart stick which can indicate water in front of you, which can speak and request people to get away and give side. There are so many such devices, but we are not scaling them up. Okay. So if CSR funds of 2% if 50% can go for innovative activities, 50% or 2% goes for innovative activities which have something new to contribute, I think country will transform.
Do we have time for one last set of questions, Shefali? Okay. Please go ahead.
Can a company use CSR funds to eradicate poverty from directors' villages?
Sorry, from?
From directors' villages. Where to eradicate poverty from the villages where directors were born.
Okay. Well, I think the quick answer is...
Yeah, it can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next one. Yeah, please.
One gentleman was complaining that there's nobody from the disability sector. I am here from Udan for the Disabled. We have been working for a quarter century with disabled persons. Now the problem is that when a person is brain damaged, there isn't much output you can show. But about 10-15% can be returned to mainstream life. Quite a few of them can be returned to inclusive schools, and the rest can be made fit, because in every family with a disabled child, there is a trained, often qualified mother who has left her job, so there are two employment losses, the person and the mother, sometimes the father also. If we have a little more attention in the disability sector, say training aids, we are wanting to take over a village. We have already identified there are about 100 disabled persons, but the brain is intact. We can teach them. We are going to do Prime Minister's skill training there, but we need some funds. So that is the place where maybe corporate can help the disabled sector to return the mother to work by enabling the child.
Okay. One more question I can take. Yes, the lady who's standing.
Yeah, I'm Pushpa from GuideStar India, and we engage 7,000 NGOs across the country. My question to the panel is, can we look at some innovative approach towards engaging NGO partners? Because, you read report after report that not enough implementing agencies are around, or they don't have enough absorptive capacity. We in the NGO sector see lots of small NGOs, and they're not necessarily ineffective or bad by not being big. So, can corporates look at engaging a large number of partners and develop a framework or an approach to do that? It almost feels like everyone wants to engage a small number of big partners rather than many small partners.
Okay. And one last question I'll take. Yes, the gentleman right at the back.
776 have engaged NGOs.
So one of the biggest problems of this country has been corruption. And it
Could you speak up, please?
One of the biggest problems of this country has been corruption. And corruption has been problem of almost all the third world countries, as well as the countries which we call developing countries. And is it possible for the corporate to spend on prevention of corruption, and will it be counted as CSR?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Professor Gupta on the disability and funding for that, and then Shankar, I'll have you take the other two.
If you look at, we have walked, some of you might know that we have Shodhyatras. So every summer, every winter, we walk through the country, and with Nagaland Shodhyatra in November 27 to December 2, we would have walked the entire country once. Now, I have not come across a single school, government school, where we have either a ramp or a toilet for disabled people. Now, there's a big challenge. The point that you're raising is extremely relevant. And it is here that we need to have retrofitting technologies where we can do at low cost, fast application facilities for the physically challenged kids, because they will drop out otherwise. Particularly girls, when there are no toilets in general and not for the physically challenged girls, they will not come to the school. So we must make sure that these kind of concerns that you're saying must find place, but we should also try to innovate in making designs of these facilities more location specific. I mean, if water table is high and you have the traditional pits, the groundwater is going to get contaminated, the hand pumps are going to get contaminated. There are so many concerns of design design innovations in this regard which need to be brought in. So what your point is valid. I hope everybody listening here will contribute to this process of making all the facilities, all public facilities, all schools, particularly to begin with, disabled, enabled, and with the best possible technology that are available in that place. But you are right that there is very little that has been done so far, but a great deal needs to be done. The other issue about how to deal with the retailing of support, I can tell you something from Honeybee Network experience. Yes, NGOs must be supported, but NGIs go much farther, non-governmental individuals. You know, the Honeybee Network couldn't have come this far. We couldn't have had 200,000 ideas from 550 districts if there were no NGIs supporting our work voluntarily. So I would say that please don't get stuck only with NGOs. By all means support them, but also look at public spirited individuals who are trying to bring change in their own areas. Empower them. And don't insist that they should set up an NGO, otherwise they won't qualify. I know, I won't name the trust. I know of a person in Nagpur who is doing wonderful work. Khusru Pocha, some of you might know. He was denied support because he refused to set up an NGO. IndianBloodDonors.org. He has saved more lives than anybody else that I know of. So therefore, there are individuals, such wonderful individuals in our society. Why can't we change our perspective and help those individuals to become the trailblazer? Thank you. And
can CSR's funding be used for innovation to solve corruption? Surely is the $2 trillion question, which is $2 trillion being India's GDP. But Shankar, have you seen any examples or anything of that sort?
Well, RTI supporting RTI.
Well, I don't know whether, I can't offhand, I must confess, think of any examples where CSR funds has been used to specifically that particular topic. But I think there are many larger topics around governance that many CSR funds have looked at, of which corruption is a component. So,
and that's permissible.
I mean, it is. Yeah. So, but I think as a subject, I must confess that that's my ignorance.
Be an incidental object.
No, but you know, in our state, I know from Gujarat, many RTI activists have been murdered. So therefore, they are doing extraordinary contribution to bring transparency. If you can empower them, you can support them, you can give them legal and other support, that will directly go to the root of the corruption which can be attacked by bringing more transparency. So there is certainly a scope for building capacity building programs, for supporting them, for networking them with each other, creating knowledge networks and institutional networks. RTI is a powerful tool, and the activists who are trying to bring greater transparency in our country are not receiving support much.
Thank you. On that note, I will have to bring this discussion to an end. It has been an enriching discussion. The one, if I were to summarize it in one line, it is very clear that the regulator, the lawyer, and the auditor all think that CSR funds can be used for breakthrough innovation, irrespective of the outcomes. So it's really only the corporates that are interpreting this in a narrow manner.